Hi. I'm not going to be talking about carbon dioxide, and I'm not going to be. I don't have any ideas, basically, to solve any great problems. I'm simply going to be talking about poetry, and I hope that you'll feel fine about that. I'm going to perform a poem, first of all, and it's an imperfect poem, because I wrote it. And after that, I'm going to present you with an idea that I believe can improve this poem, hopefully. But let's begin with the poem. It's called If Only I Were a Tsunami. If only I were a tsunami, I would choose carefully where to strike. I would pick out idiots and liars and then hit them with my great powers. I would be the first tsunami ever to be at least slightly sane. Not a single dictator in the world would avoid me. Yanukovych, Bush, and Mugabe going down the drain. If only I were a tsunami, of course. I would, oh yes, I would avoid to hit children, first of all. And I would leave the tourists to get even more fat and even more sunburned on the beaches, and the people of Indonesia have seen enough shit, so even the most annoying man in Sumatra, I'd only give a quick cold shower and then leave him to dry on a rock somewhere. Nothing like the amateur tsunami, oh no, not me. I'd be brave. I'd be pretty cool, actually. I'd be strong. I would never sit alone and wait for the phone to ring, you to sing, my heart to go bing, 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 no love too is easy, I suppose, if you can conquer everything. I'd be brave. And I might just use this unbelievable craft on building just a tiny raft, yes. I'd be brave and you'd be safe floating there on my strong back, not looking back, not going zigzag, no please. Imagine this, me being 10 million gallons of water and you floating there on my back just sort of looking at the world. All the places I'd take you, the places not fake to you, the places not fake to me. Intolerance, indifference, just worlds we'd break through, see a world so free of expectations. There'd be no limitations, just a bunch of nations giving standing ovation. If only I were a tsunami, of course. I would turn politics into poetry. Piss into pure gold. I would turn winter in Berlin into summer in Bahamas. I'd turn Budweiser into beer. If only I were a tsunami, of course. Yeah. People might just wake up one morning after my worldwide campaign, and they might just think to themselves, hey, that made sense. Yeah, they might just wake up one morning thinking to themselves, what a fucking relief that something finally made sense. So my small idea is called open source poetry. Here's the thing. I wrote this poem. Here it is. I wrote this poem just after the Indian Ocean tsunami of 2004. I was frustrated. So I wrote a poem. And honestly, I'm quite happy with that poem. I'm okay, I feel good about it. I've performed it a lot of times, and I'm proud of it, to be honest. But I think it could be better. I wrote this poem alone. It's the perceptual illusion, it's the perceptual conception of poetry that is always written alone. It should always be written by one person. But I'm here to challenge that perception. I'm here to say that we were all there. We were all in the world in 2004, the late December, when this happened. We all felt more or less the same thing. We were all frustrated. What could this poem have become if we had all written it together? So, before I'm going to tell you more about open source poetry and how it works technically, You're all experts on wikis and stuff like that by now, so it should be easy for me. But I'm going to take you through a brief history of poetry. We've had so many people looking into the future today, and I'm proud to be the one looking 4,700 years back. This is the Epic of Gilgamesh, and it's the first poem that we know of. It's from the 27th century before Christ, and it basically tells the story of a king. His name was Gilgamesh, and his quest for immortality. And I don't think I'm going to surprise a lot of you when I tell you that he didn't find it. He didn't succeed. But the poem did. The poem has lived for more than 4,000 years, and I think if we don't have too many ecological disasters, that this will live for the next 4,000 years, and hopefully even longer. Then, when poetry hit Europe, this is from Iraq, Mesopotamia, but when poetry hit Europe, when that great trend came to Europe, the great ego started to play a role. The first one of the first ones, Homer. Then we have Dante, Shakespeare, Hans Christian Andersen, and so on. I like the great egos, I like the poetry of them. But I think that they have been a part of leading Western culture into focusing on the individual, always on the individual, the genius, Hans Christian Andersen. It seems to me that Western culture has been driving itself into a ditch. Here we go. And now, as the wheels keep spinning, we just press the pedal even harder. We drive into that ditch further and further down. We're digging a hole for ourselves, constantly looking at the individual and this great genius. Here we go. This is where we are now. No one knows what this guy is called, but he's hot. And actually I know what his name is. It's Peter. I've seen the show. It's a nice show. Here we have me. And one of my points today is that I think it's time now to free great art from the great egos. And I'll show you this picture to show you that this might also be a challenge to me. So, let me ask you one thing. How many of you have read a whole poetry collection within the last year? How many of you have read more than 5 whole poetry collections within the last year? We are 100 people here, so it should be really easy for me to calculate it into percentages, and especially when the number is 0. How many of you have seen more than 5 movies this year? Okay, 100%. To me, there is no reason that poetry should be so exclusive. I mean, movie makers, they're looking for smart new ways to make us see movies everywhere. But hey, the poetry collection is right here. And it's, I mean, you can bring it everywhere. You can read one poem in the bus and then the next one on the train. It's perfect. But it's been so excluding. When we got here this morning, the organizers told me, they said, hey, please don't sit on this couch over here. It's broken, as you see. Please don't sit on it. And that's how we've been looking at poetry. Please don't use it. It's more of a decoration that we have in society. I'm here to say, let's use it. Let's forget about all the rules and using poetry as a decoration. Let's sit in it and let's lie in it. Let's have sex in the couch of poetry. Open source poetry. It's simply a website. On the left, you see a list of poems. Now there are just 4. There can be hundreds. That's no problem. Now we have clicked on the one called Tsunami, and right here on the right, we see a thread. The first one up there, that's me, that's my version. And then we have remixes. You click on my version, and you get the chance to check out. That's an old open source lingo. And we try to stick to that. So you check out, and that gives you the chance to rewrite it. And it's simple like using Word or whatever you used to write on a computer. And here is a guy who thinks there has to be something more 2010 than tsunamis. And he comes up with this. If only I were an earthquake, I'd choose carefully where to strike a bear. Okay. So that might not be the most original solution to the problem, but okay, he gave it a shot. So that's the one called Thor Hammer there. And then people can take that and say, okay, so he might not be the greatest poet of 2010, but I kind of like the idea, so let me rewrite a bit on his poem. And here we go. Someone's writing, if I were an earthquake, I'd choose carefully where to shake. I would pick sunset kisses and train station reunions, and I would make them dance. And there we go, and it's right there called Freebird, I think. And another one, giving it a whole other try, and we could go on. The point is that as a writer, you can dig into the exact version that excites you, the one version that gives you something, that gives you an idea, that triggers something inside of you, and you can rewrite that edition, and you save it, you check in, as we say, and you contribute to this whole tree of poetry. And as a reader, you have the chance to follow the evolution of this poem. And I think that's a marvelous journey to go into, and something that hasn't been opened before. The idea is that we work together on finding the best sentences, the most powerful expressions. We work together on finding the best use of the language that we are all so dependent on every time we want to express what's in our hearts and in our minds. And in that way, I end up talking about everything anyways. Because we need that. We need poetry, we need language if we want to express what's going on, because there's a lot of things going on. We've seen that here today, and I believe that we need language to express it. This is a definition of open source, or like the principles behind open source. They were written in 1998 by something called the Open Source Initiative. I'm not going to go through them all. Mainly because I don't understand half of them, they're very technical. But the first one, free redistribution, I kind of like. So I've taken that and put aside because I want to write my own principles about open source poetry. Then, luckily, the principles behind open source are open source themselves. So a lot of people have rewritten them and done a lot of things to them, and these are somehow more easy for me to understand. Don't whine unless you're going to implement it yourself. If you don't work on your project, chances are that no one will. A project is never finished. And here's a funny thing, because when I was digging into this, I found that there are connections between poetry and the geeks that program software like Firefox and WordPress and Linux and all of these things. Because look at this, Paul Valéry. A poem is never finished, only abandoned. Oh, I just put that in because I thought it was a funny connection. The user is always right unless proven otherwise by the developer. And then we move down here saying, you are your best tester, and your users are your second best testers. And then I've tried to combine all this to form the principles of what I call open source poetry, the thing that I've just been explaining to you how it works. And this is the headline: share and improve. And here we go. Free redistribution. I just stole that, as you saw. But that goes for me as well. So if any of you or anyone out there wants to put up open source poetry in their own country, or in their own town, or whatever, they just want to make their own open source poetry, well, just give me a ring, send me an email. I'm on all of these social medias. So you can find me, you can give me a bip, and I'll send you all the codes, and you can implement it on any web page or anything, anywhere you want. Don't complain unless you give it a shot yourself. I am sick and tired of poet critics. I want to tell them all to shut up and just keep writing. A poem is never finished, only abandoned. I stole that as one as well. The reader is always right unless proven otherwise by the poet. You are your best tester. Your reader is your second best tester. If you like it, let the poet know. And if you don't, let the poet know why. And then write. And I couldn't come up with any more. I have a very limited amount of ideas. But that goes to prove as well that we work better together. So maybe some of you this afternoon or tonight, or maybe later this week, you will have an idea saying, hey, I have an idea for number 9 or number 10, because I think there ought to be 10 commandments, right? This here is an ant. And even though we heard earlier today that you shouldn't be that, you shouldn't be that fast when you comment on animals' intelligence. I feel free to say that ants are quite stupid. Let's face it, they are small, stupid insects. Yet, by constantly walking a little bit further than the ant before them, and by letting the other ants know where they've been, they manage to build domes, small domes out of dirt. And that is fascinating. We are people, and we have the potential to go even further. In the future, everyone will have the 0 minutes of fame, I say. I want you to consider for just 3 seconds that if poets work together, can they, by their actions and their words, be an inspiration to all of us? If we can take the most self-absorbed of all art genres and we can make it give up ownership, can that build wonders out of words? Can poetry help heal the frustration that we all feel from time to time? If poetry is great, will it reach you? And will it move you? I believe it will. Thank you very much.